Welcome to Rates and Barrels to Monday, March 10th. Derek VanRiper, Eno Sarris here with you. On this episode, we dig into the recent rash of injuries around the league, especially to pitchers. It's been a rough couple of days for rankings, for rotations. We'll dig into the implications of that. Eno is on location in Goodyear. If you're watching us on YouTube, you see the background. You see Eno with his spring training shades on. So we are in true March form on this pod. We're also going to do a few mailbag questions a bit later on in the show as well. And as we have for the last few shows, we're going to start with a little bit of housekeeping, a reminder of our upcoming live shows at Bear Bottle Brewing Company in San Francisco on opening day, March 27th, and the Friday after opening day, March 28th, 4:30 local start, free admission. We'd love to see as many of you out there as possible for that, because we had a special beer we collaborated with. Eno got to make it, and we're excited about that. We're excited to get out there and have some live shows right around the festivities.
We've seen the merch. We've seen the merch.
Yeah.
New logo. Exciting.
It's a merch logo. We're going to keep the bats for the podcast, but we've got a new merch logo that we're going to use. So we're excited about that. I think people are going to dig it, and we'll have that merch on hand when we get to those live shows, unless there's some kind of like shipping error. I shouldn't promise anything because you can't trust
That's
shipping.
Right.
We're on time for it right now.
Oops. I'm always the guy who's like, and this and this and this. And then I'm like, oh, well, that didn't work out. Sorry.
We're supposed to have it there. We'll see.
We're supposed to have merch. We'll have merch of some sort. So
Yeah, it might just be personal items that we've gathered. The backup merch. It's kind of like at First Pitch Arizona for years. Ron Chandler, he would be downsizing, getting ready for his retirement move to Florida. And
so he just brings stuff.
old like yearbooks of the team media guides and various collectibles. It was always like a great prize table, courtesy of Ron's basement. So that might be the merch if our merch doesn't show up on time. Hopefully our merch will show up on time. As for the news,
it is not good. It's not good. It was a bad week in news.
Usually, we were cruising along pretty good for the first week of spring training. I felt like we may have been a little bit under for how things normally progress, but you get through that first and second turn through the rotation, elbows and shoulders and lats all start barking. And the big one is that Gerrit Cole has been advised to undergo Tommy John surgery. He's going to get a second opinion. So we're in that part of the limbo right now. But this is not great for the Yankees, of course, because it's tacked on to a significant injury for Luis Gil. And it's pretty rare to get the TJ recommendation reported only to have them say, no, we're going to do the PRP injection and it's going to be fine. So I don't think this ends particularly well. If you are thinking about a draft right now, you're probably not even drafting Cole outside of the last couple of rounds in case you get some miracle good news. But this really looks like it's going to be a full year absence for Gerrit Cole.
Yeah, I had a really depressing piece up on the site today about how far the Yankees rotation has fallen with this news. And I think you pencil in Cole for 0 and Gil for 75 or something, It's that devastating. And when you do that, this rotation falls from something that was 6th when pitchers and catchers reported this was the 6th best rotation in baseball. And now it might be bottom 3rd. I mean, that's the analysis I provided. But I do, there's always a sliver of hope. There's always a maybe something cool that can come out of a disaster like this. And for me, that's Will Warren. I'm excited to see what he can do with this rotation spot. When you look at Stuff Plus, it said he had 5 viable major league pitches and the kind of starter Michael King package. And that's what I chose to highlight as the piece of hope here is that, he threw 130 innings last year. The ERA wasn't good at the major league level, but the pieces looked okay, at least by the model. I do want to throw out there that I read Keith Slaw's prospect piece about the Yankees, and he had Will Warren, I forget, it was like 15th or something, and the blurb is devastating. He's like, it's so funny too, because he's like, no matter what your model says, he's like, this is a middle game reliever, no matter what the model says. It was so good, Keith. I love you. But I mean, that does represent the range of opinions about Will Warren. I'm still on the positive side, especially after, I don't know if you saw that start. He had a great start against Zach Wheeler, where he outdueled Zach Wheeler, and the baby baby Bronx, the baby Pinstripes guys, Spencer Jones and Jason Dominguez both had big games, and I don't know. I was like, this is the future. This is what they need to be, and we're gonna finally maybe get some more information about the ongoing discussion we've had about how good Yankee player development actually is. I mean, this is going to be the year where they're going to have to turn to the kids. Cabrera at third, Will Warren in the rotation, Volpe every day, Jason every day. It's going to happen. Spencer Jones may get a shot with the other bad news, the other elbow news in New York. What do you think is going to happen because of Giancarlo Stanton's possible double elbow surgery?
I'm
laughing because it's just like, oh man, Giancarlo, dude, what a career.
I don't know how double tennis elbow turns into possible season-ending elbows surgeries.
Yeah.
And I'm not getting. I'm not actually laughing at Giancarlo Stanton.
Oh my God, it's just
you can't make this script up of all of this stuff happening.
It's really about the worst the news could be for them.
Yeah,
I think there's even DJ LeMahieu news too. It's like there's just all the old guys just suddenly were like,
yeah, they all broke at the same time. I think the Stanton situation, well, for one, in conjunction with LeMahieu, it creates a scenario where Cabrera and Peraza might be in the lineup together a lot. Like that's among the first iterations. I wonder if it leaves the door open for Grisham.
Yes, I've seen some more mock-ups with Grisham starting in center and Bellinger to a corner. But I think they're going to want offense. I mean, there's enough question around whether or not Paul Goldschmidt, how much he has left. You're leaving, at least third base open for somebody who's not proven offensively, And with Stanton gone at DH, now you've got two spots that may not have offense in them. So I think most days it's Jason, Cody, and Judge in the outfield. Maybe we'll see more Ben Rice. But with the way Spencer Jones is playing, there's at least a small possibility that they'd rather go with that with his offensive upside. But can we build a bench real quick? I mean, it's really hard because
can we?
There's no Stanton. Let's say Stanton, LeMahieu are out, right? So Peraza makes this team now for sure. Along with Cabrera. Cabrera's the starting third baseman. Peraza's the backup shortstop, backup middle infielder. So you got Peraza and Jackson. Grisham we didn't have starting, so that's 3. We don't have a starting DH and we don't have a backup DH. We have 2 spots left. And so it could be Ben Rice and Everson Pereira, Ben Rice and Anthony Rizzo, signing somebody. Seems like maybe Ben Rice and Oswald Peraza make the team with this news.
Yeah, I just started to think maybe a reunion with Rizzo makes some sense because you add a guy that's a lefty that can DH, mix and match with Goldschmidt, gives you a little bit more insurance if Goldschmidt is washed. I don't think Goldschmidt's completely done. I think even his step down last year would be acceptable if he repeated that over a full season. You could live with that. The hole is still third base, like we talked about, I think, last week. But as far as how the bench goes, yeah, I think Jackson, Peraza, Grisham, and Everson Pereira. And Pereira is kind of a post-hype sleeper for really deep leagues, right? The question's going to be the approach. Is there too much swing and miss for him to stick as more than a small side platoon player? But I don't know, man. Like when you look at the quality of contact Everson Pereira has made in the brief time he's been with the Yankees, that was in 2023, and what he's done at AAA, where we have some hard hit numbers, it might actually be enough damage to get by. So if you said they're not signing Rizzo, they're doing this with internal options, the Ben Rice, Everson Pereira duo playing more in some kind of tandem, maybe that actually leaves Pereira as a bit of a sleeper that comes in and claims more playing time than expected. It might not happen right away, but he's at least an interesting guy to give some playing time to.
Yeah, I think that's the way because right now Ben Rice is projecting to be, 5% or more above league average with the bat. And I know that's just projections and it's theory at this point and hasn't really been demonstrated. But I think that's something that they would look at as like, okay, we want the offensive option. Pereira can play more in the outfield, so that gives them a sort of fourth outfielder that can be at DH. The other options are less exciting offensively in sort of Horbit Vivas.
Yeah, I like Vivas.
And Pablo Reyes. So if they wanted a little bit more of somebody who could play infield, do you like either of those guys a little bit more? I mean, Vivas is having a good spring at least. 7 plate appearances doesn't suggest they're giving him that much of a look, though.
I think Vivas is more of a like a Juan Brito sort of profile, right? Where it's not a lot of hard contact, but he controls the zone really well, and maybe you're just looking for somebody that brings some speed to the table, can play a couple of infield spots. The thing I don't know about Vivas is if he plays any spot well, but if you have a floating DH spot, maybe you can get away with that. So he's another interesting name. A lot of these guys are really like mono league type players initially. You don't really see an immediate mixed league impact sort of guy other than maybe Ben Rice because of the 2 catcher aspect of a 15-team league. But even then, he's your 3rd catcher, probably not your 2nd catcher, because we're not locking him into the full share of playing time.
We're too far into the weeds here. These things don't matter for most people. But I would say, just looking it over, Pablo Reyes is playing more. He's 31, so he has no upside. But they may just want his ability to play third to have some defensive ability there. I don't think they want to play Jazz at third a lot with the elbow. So I think Pablo Reyes may make this team. It looks like right now, if they don't make any more signings, I think there's 2 out of the 3 of Rice, Pereira, and Pablo Reyes make the team.
Going back to what you said before, though, Will Warren and Keith Law telling you to basically take your model and throw it in the dumpster.
Yeah.
F your feelings and your model. That's a shirt that Keith would probably wear. Yeah. I think Will Warren is a little underrated right now because the numbers were so bad at AAA last year, but he was well over a strikeout per inning. He's had swing and miss stuff throughout his time in the Yankees system. He's a converted reliever out of college. And when you get to AAA and have a home run problem, it's not PCL because they play Scranton Wilkes-Barre in the International League. I still wonder how much of that is just a artifact of the league, though. Like, I think there is
having to come into a smaller zone or something. Yeah,
right. Yeah, like how much of that is an ABS thing where you're working differently and then you're getting punished for it, right? So, I mean, we've seen other guys come through the system of various organizations, pitch well up to about AA, have the numbers go really sideways at AAA, come up and then pitch a lot better in the big leagues, get better results in the big leagues.
Jared Jones's AAA numbers are just, you're like, what? I don't understand. Everything else is normal.
Yeah, so I think Will Warren is kind of like a fringy top 300 overall sort of pick. I think he's probably like a bench pitcher for a lot of people. I think in 12-team leagues, he may get scooped up eventually, probably more of an in-season ad or one of your last picks in that format.
Yeah, you could. I mean, he could be one of those guys. Like you like him or you like Jose Soriano, or like any of these sleepers. You take one of them, you give them 2 or 3 turns of the rotation, maybe not in your lineup in a shallower league. And if they're no good, you move on to the next flavor of the month.
Do you put Marcus Stroman kind of in the Jameson Taillon sort of bucket now that his job security
just a
has
capable
increased?
Veteran? The one thing is, though, that I was looking this up, and you can't just like when you're doing the depth chart thing, you're like, Cole is hurt, just move Stroman in, give him 180. He hasn't pitched 180 innings since 2019, so he is the guy that does miss time. So I would give him 140 innings. The problem is, innings are like basically his best argument for value because it's not the strikeout rate. In fact, he's going to hurt you in strikeout rate, and he's not projected to help you in ERA, and he's always had a bad whip because he's kind of a ground ball guy. So 140 innings of a poor ERA and a poor whip at the poor strikeout rate is not a great argument for. I would take Taillon over him, and I would take Warren over him because I'd rather have the upside of Warren than, like bad oatmeal. It's like
right, and I think the thing I'm worried about now is Stroman.
Camping oatmeal, that like instant oatmeal. You just put the water in. You're like, this is not really the good stuff.
Undercooked, a little chewy, a little tough. Yeah, you don't want that. There is going to be and I'm with you. I prefer Warren to Stroman. I think Stroman is draftable in 15s, but he's more like a streamer. He's not somebody you're going to throw out there every single start and feel good about it. There is a related question to all these pitching injuries that we're going to talk about is, will this move Kyle Gibson or Lance Lynn onto a roster, or will this expedite a Sandy Alcantara trade? And I think trading Sandy Alcantara in the spring when he hasn't pitched outside of spring games yet coming off of TJ seems kind of unlikely. It's not like the Dylan Cease trade a year ago where you're talking about a healthy guy that just is looking for a new team because his current one's rebuilding. It's that plus the rehab question. So there are options out there. I just don't know if Gibson or Lynn really solve a problem for the Yankees. Like, I think you already have guys that can do something similar. So you're probably waiting until you get to that in-season trade point. And maybe the first 50 or 60 games actually dictates how aggressively they want to pursue a big upgrade like Sandy when we get to the deadline, right? I mean, things don't break well for this roster. They could be in trouble.
And my nightmare is that they actually put Warren in the minors and go with Carrasco. But, but like, how do you convince Carlos Carrasco to pitch in AAA and offer you sort of emergency depth? That's what I'm saying. It's like that. If you want to keep Carlos Carrasco, you may need to start the season with him. But I do think is Gibson or Lynn much better than Carlos Carrasco? Maybe a little bit better, but they're asking for more money. You know, Carrasco came on a minor league deal, so there's still like, you know, when you're trying to project Will Warren's like innings total, like I just put 140 down, but that feels too aggressive still because of the games that people play with rosters and with young players, you know. Mm-hmm. And I think there's at least a 5-10% chance that they give Carlos Carrasco the first shot at the rotation because they're going to lose him if they don't.
Again, guys that probably won't make a big impact for us from a fantasy perspective, but that's the situation the Yankees are looking at right now, where it's been a rough spring for them in Tampa. How about this news? This one doesn't seem as bad, but George Kirby won't be ready for opening day. There are no structural concerns, according to Mariners GM Justin Hollander. The way Hollander described it, quote, "This is more like a week-to-week thing than a day-to-day thing. We just want to make sure we're doing the right thing for the big picture of the whole season as opposed to worrying about opening day," end quote. So is this similar to what they did with Luis Castillo? I believe that was just last season. Slow play a little bit in April, came back, and he was actually fine. I mean, is this more of that, or is this a greater cause for concern?
Yeah, I think there's actually something going on here that clouds the picture when it comes to injuries because we're all on high alert because the number of injury placement days is up. But you know, there was an interesting thing that Mike Petriello was looking at where he was talking about, you know, number of pitchers that, you know, threw at least 50 innings or something has actually been quite steady. And that the big increase in the number of pitchers used has been of the sort of up and down variety, the guys who get 20 innings or something in a season. And what that says to me is it's the 10-day IL, stupid. We went to a 10-day IL. So now I think teams are using the 10-day IL more liberally to be out in front of injuries like this. So I'm talking in-season stuff, but this, I think it relates to this, is that I think that teams are being more cautious ahead of time and trying to promote with their pitchers a sense of tell us if you're feeling anything. It's better to miss 2 or 3 weeks now than to miss the season, you know? And so that's what I see, you know, the common thread here is let's shut this down a little bit now and see what's going on rather than, you know, let this turn into a problem where you miss the rest of the season. And shoulders in particular are really the one you don't want to have surgery on.
So with that in mind, George Kirby was your number 10 starting pitcher on your pitching rankings when those were first published. Cole was 11th, by the way. So we'll do some would you rathers. George Kirby versus Framber Valdez if you're drafting today for the upcoming season.
I would take Framber. I still have Framber down for 174 innings. I had him 12, which may be a little bit ahead of the market, but he's just a really solid guy. And that used to be what Kirby is, but now you can't say he's as solid.
All right, George Kirby versus Blake Snell.
I've got 150 innings for Kirby and 141 for Snell. Snell is going to strike out him in fewer innings, so Snell.
All right. How about this one? George Kirby versus Jacob deGrom if you're drafting today.
deGrom is healthy now? I think it becomes harder. Maybe Max Fried, Hunter Brown.
All right. So then you're glass now over George Kirby right now?
Yeah, I think maybe Fried. Yeah, so I think I'm going to move him down to something like 17th or 18th. Maybe he'll take Grayson Rodriguez's spot, which that's a whole nother story.
Ugh, yeah. In the meantime, by the way, for any time that George Kirby misses, it looks like Emerson Hancock will get the first opportunity to be the fifth starter for the Mariners to begin this season. But I think I agree with the rough adjustment here. I think what's complicated about it is where Glasnow and Fried and Brown go relative to where Kirby was going. You might move Kirby down in the rankings below those guys, but you're not necessarily drafting the guys you like better than him now at the same price as Kirby before. There's going to be some late movement, of course, in the pitching market, because now we're at the point where most of the leagues being drafted are typical leagues with in-season moves. We were in draft and hold season for a while, and that kind of pushes pitching down a little bit, relatively speaking. So, yeah, probably a 5 to 7 spot tumble on the rankings for George Kirby based on this news, because a couple starts at least.
Like what you're saying too, like people just rise in the rankings because they're just stayed healthy. They're just the other people are dropping around them. I mean, that's why I'm gonna have an update. I'm hoping to do it next week. Travel makes it hard and all that stuff. I'm keeping track of it. I've got working ranks. I'm moving guys up and down as we speak, and I moved Grayson Rodriguez down into the 40s. I think we should do
a Madison live show at the Working Draft Brewery at some point, because our whole lives are working drafts. It's just a perfect name for how we operate. So yeah, slight downgrade though for Kirby for the time being. I think the Grayson Rodriguez situation is slightly more ominous. On a 1 to 10, how ominous is this injury news scale? This is more like a 4. Cole's like a 10.
I really don't like it. It really doesn't. It doesn't feel good when they're like, nothing's hurt. Well, maybe something's hurt. Okay, he's going for an MRI. Okay, it's torn.
Yeah.
That's how it feels like we're going.
I found a good story. Andy Koska from the Baltimore Banner had a pretty good group of details about it. Had some quotes from Brandon Hyde, and it's discomfort in the back of Grayson Rodriguez's right elbow. So it's the triceps initially. It's okay, back of the elbow triceps. That checks out. Hyde said it's not a ligament issue. You will miss time into the regular season and will seek multiple opinions before deciding on a treatment path. So, yeah, maybe even a 5 on the ominous scale.
Multiple opinions I do not like.
It happens. I mean, it's a somewhat common thing for more serious injuries. But yeah, usually multiple opinions. It's the imaging, and sometimes that's inconclusive.
I'm trying to guess what they like. I guess if he's saying it's not a ligament issue, then they're saying, is the tricep torn or not? It's like,
or could it be a nerve problem or something along those lines?
Yeah, okay.
Those are always a little trickier to diagnose and going to set forth on your treatment path. So this leaves one of Albert Suarez or Cade Povich in the rotation for the Orioles to start the season. Do you have a favorite between those two?
Yeah, I'm coming around on Povich.
Load him win. Load him for the win.
I by the way, I didn't finish that analysis off. Emerson Hancock is not really. I don't think it's a load him situation for me. I don't think he's very. Somebody I want to bet on. But Povich, I do actually like a little bit. And the reason that I like Povich is not, I think, the reason that was given to me is why he was so good. He is not really dominant. He is not a stuff guy. I think he's developing a wider arsenal. So let me see here what I have here for his Arsenal scores. From Baseball Prospectus, I have him in the 72nd percentile, with 6 pitches. So he's developing an ability to separate the movements on his pitches and separate, and surprise people with different pitches. So it's a wide arsenal with, I think, better command than he had last year. He was supposed to have command coming up. So, he has a 4.18 oopsie projection for ERA and a 21.6% strikeout rate. That's not terrible. I mean, that is definitely somebody who could pitch to like a 3.6, 3.7 ERA for 3 months, So I like Cade Povich. I have him right now in the 130s with 99 innings, but I don't know. I think he's probably going to get more than 99 innings now. So give him 121 innings, and he probably moves into like the top 115, 110, something like that.
And even if you didn't want to change the innings projection right now, you're changing the timing of those innings, right? When you project 90, 100 for a guy like this, it's, well, I don't know when they're happening, so that's part of why he's buried. If they're front loaded, you're just ranking for the first month of the season.
Rotation or not? Yeah, totally.
Yeah, because he could pitch well, someone else could get hurt. All those scenarios are on the table as well. I liked Povich a little bit last year because he was pitching well at AAA. He was over a strikeout per inning, and as you said, control was pretty good. So I thought that was going to be a strength for him. I think year 2 should be better. And Albert Suarez is kind of interesting, but there's still something missing in that mix. He's also a little older, having played overseas and come back. So I think Povich is the guy I prefer here. I think of the new starters that are breaking through, Warren first, Povich second, Hancock third for me. Stroman probably ahead of Emerson Hancock, but they're both in that streaming bucket. I think Emerson Hancock might be easier to stream because of his home park. So I think those are the initial thoughts I have on these new guys that are kind of in the mix for us. I got this update. This is from Fabian Ardaya. The Dodgers have slowed down on Shohei Ohtani's throwing progression. So he hasn't thrown a bullpen session since February 25th, but he hasn't stopped throwing completely. He's still playing catch and doing flat ground stuff. It really seems like the previous timetable of Ohtani pitching in games in May is in question. The Dodgers won't really say as much. And I think what I underestimated, bless you, about Shohei Ohtani in this instance was just that because of the shoulder rehab, he was going to have to take longer to do everything. Like, I didn't really factor that in. Like, that was probably a mistake on my part all along, being too optimistic that because he usually just does everything that he would plow through it. I think this is relatively normal news, as much as you could have normal news for a two-way player. It's like, of course they're backing off him because he's already playing in spring games as a hitter. He had a tank at his first plate appearance of the spring, and he's going to play in the series in Japan next week. So the fact that
when's he have time to pitch?
Then that's what they pointed out. Dave Roberts pointed out, it's like with the game schedule ramping up, we just figured it was better to back off him a little bit. So I think he's still going to pitch this year. I think it's more like June or July is probably where they're going to end up setting that timetable. And it's more maybe backloading those innings because, hey, once we get to the playoffs, we have innings in the tank for Ohtani. That's probably a really good thing. If we use them all up in the first 5 months of the regular season, when he starts pitching again, maybe he's running on fumes in October, and that's not the best thing either. It's a bummer if you pulled the DVR, draft him as a pitcher only in leagues where he's 2 players, and you're sitting there with a guy on your non-IL bench that you have to wait for, but it's a very specific scenario. So I don't know, man. Should we even be surprised that they had to back off in this case? And does this change your valuation of Ohtani overall? Do you feel like maybe he'll hit a lot less than we previously expected as a result of pitching again? They've said that he'll hit less than he did last year, but how much less, right?
And when will he hit less in the second half of the season when he's pitching?
Right.
So the timing of that is interesting. I think also, what do you think the over under is on his innings? I just moved him to 92 innings. That almost seems aggressive given this news.
It's feeling like 80 was probably about right. Because they're gonna have extra days off for all their starters anyway, and if there's anything that's bothering him, they have depth. They don't need to push it, and they do want to keep his bat in the lineup as often as possible. So you can go back to sort of a kid glove sort of approach, and it's completely justified given the circumstances.
Yeah, I agree. Generally, sort of what I was talking about earlier too. About I think everyone's just more cautious now. So.
Right. But they should be. It just makes some sense. Got some news here from C. Trent Rosecrans of The Athletic. Novi Marte optioned to AAA. Not a big surprise. And if you've been reading C. Trent, he's been telling you has not been Novi Marte working with the starters, the A team, like the guys that are clearly breaking camp. It gives him an opportunity to just kind of press reset, maybe go down to Louisville, mash for April and part of May, and maybe come back to a depth chart that will be thinned out by injuries or an underperformer that they want to play less, right? I think the situation, while it's bad for short-term value, might actually be the right call long-term to get Novi Marte back on track.
Yeah, I do have some shares, but mostly what I did was treated him as a prospect at the position. So the shares are like draft and hold third baseman kind of things, where it's like that doesn't that prospect status hasn't changed. He's still a prospect that is close to the big leagues. He's like a sixth starter in a rotation, right? He's like one of these guys who's had his feet wet, is ready to play in the major leagues, just needs to maybe show it, needs to, maybe do some penance, for getting in trouble, and maybe he has to, this is the Cole he has to deal with for the meantime. His status is also reduced by his play since he came back from the suspension. So there's a lot of things going on there where he has to sort of reclaim his status. But I do think that there's still a job waiting for him because, Heimer Candelario at 31, projected to be below league average as a bat by most projection systems, is no longer an asset on defense either. And so if Heimer Candelario is out there with a 90 WRC plus playing third base poorly, you could still get Noelvi Marte in that lineup pretty quick.
All right, you were on the scene in Goodyear, checking in from Guardians spring training today, right? Guardians and Reds, I believe, also out in Goodyear.
Yeah, they share the facility out here.
All right. Out in Arizona. So, who you been talking to?
Well, it was good to check in with Kai Correa, who's one of my favorite coaches, behind-the-scene coaches out there. He is the defensive genius behind the Guardians' sort of defensive surge at one point, and he was in charge of the program that was just pumping out shortstops for the Guardians, and then he moved on to helping the Giants with that old team that won like 107 games or whatever. He was a big part of the genius there, so good to see him. He's a Hawaiian dude in baseball, which is also just a cool thing. And so we reminisced about the Big Island a little bit and just talk shop. And there was some talk about what is Oakland going to play like, not only as a field. We were talking a little bit about how hot Sacramento's going to be, and then how bad the field might be. See, he's a defensive coach. He cares about these things. But how bad the field might be because they're going to be playing more than your normal 81. It's going to be closer to 150 games on that turf. And they decided not to do turf because it'd be too hot. So the heat and the turf, all kind of, that's what people are talking about. People are talking about what the facilities will be like, in terms of players. Will it be, in a pro level, big league level situation over there, or will everybody roll their eyes when they see Sacramento on the schedule? So that was a little part of the conversation. I'm also doing some pieces about coaching and makeup. So it was good to see Stephen Vogt, who I think is through the roof in coaching and makeup. Love that dude. And then I checked in with the two starters that I think are primed to break out this year. Tanner Bibee already pitched pretty well last year, but he was talking to me about his fastball. He thinks said he's showing more vert this spring, but also that command was part of this. And so I put together this heat map here. On the left, if you're looking on YouTube, and I'll share this on Discord later, is the heat map for where Tanner Bibee throws his fastballs to lefties. And he generally gets it high in the zone. He's a high in the zone guy. But you see it's all over the zone. There's a little bit too much middle. And then you look over at the right, and that's the slugging percentage on lefties versus his fastball. And it's like middle up. They like it. And he says he's trying to mostly throw his four seam up and away to lefties. You look at that heat map, and he said, I was yanking it. And he said he's a big supinator. He's a big on the side of the ball slider, breaking ball guy. And when you throw a fastball and you're supinated a little bit, you can tend to hold on to it a little bit longer and yank it. So he said the solution for him was had to do with being taller coming through. So that if you're hunched over, you kind of Clark Schmidt when he comes through is kind of hunched over. He does a sinker sweeper kind of action. He wants to be a little bit more vertical. That's something that Casey Mize talks about getting his vert on his four seam better and getting better with staying vertical, just so that the spin on the fastball is more vertical if you're more vertical. Something that's as simple as that. So he was running me through the cues that he has to try and not yank the four seam. I asked him about the two seam. He said it's his old two seam that he used to throw, and he's working it back in. I asked him, why did you only throw one? You talked about adding a sinker, and then you went out and you threw one. And he goes, well, they had like 5 straight lefties at the top, and I just wasn't going to throw a lot of sinkers to those lefties. So, it is something that's going to help him against righties. Not yanking the four seam will help him against lefties. I think, he's a good pitcher. Not the greatest fastball in the world, but it might be a little bit better this year. And I think he reminds me a little bit of Bieber. Just a really good breaking balls, really good supinator that has pushed his four seam to being viable. And Gavin Williams, on the other hand, said that injury was really the reason for everything last year. He said that he was kind of babying his elbow a little bit, and that he just was aware of possible injury there. And that led to certain things in his delivery that he wasn't comfortable with. He said this year he feels good. He's got the best extension in the big leagues among starters. And he thinks, Voter even said that he's got his shapes back. So he's got like a power slider that has a little bit more depth than, it's not a cutter. It was labeled as a cutter last year. What he wants is like a power gyro slider, because that'll pair well with going against lefties with the curveball. So he's a very sort of vertical guy that, that has huge extension down the mound at you. And I continue to believe that he's ready to break out.
He's had a huge spring so far. I mean, it's 16 strikeouts in 8 innings so far, just a 1.13 ERA. He struck out half the batters that he's faced so far this spring. I would say Gavin Williams is trending towards the popular sleeper that's going to jump up boards a little bit with this health this spring, but also might still be worth it at a rising price. Even if you're talking about him at pick 150 by the time we get to the end of the month, you may still get enough value from Gavin Williams to justify that. And it is interesting to hear that Bibee's trying to fix that four-seam problem. And the specific details of that, I think, are really interesting, just because we've talked about that being his biggest hurdle on this show. If he can unlock that fastball, make it just a little bit more effective, a little bit more consistent by location or by ride, that would go a long way towards maybe pushing him into firmer SP2 status, right? He's kind of fringy for SP2 status right now, but you give him a Zach Gallen sort of workload in his peak year, I think you could see similar results from Tanner Bibee. So 2 really interesting guys to catch up with. And thinking about what you said with Kai Correa, has Kai ever mentioned particular infields that are like better or worse than others around the big leagues? Like, it's so in my brain, because I'm not an on-field coach, never played in the big leagues, I'm like, they're big league fields. They're all very well maintained, and short of the Luke Bryan concert that tears up an outfield here and there throughout the summer, like generally the fields are in really good shape. And I imagine the players and the coaches, especially coaches focusing on fielding, are hyper aware of differences in surfaces.
I have asked about that. I forget what the rankings were and who was bad and who was good, but I do know that this is the source of differential. It comes a little bit from my conversation about which mounds are different. Mm-hmm. So depending on how wet your area is, like just in terms of humidity and rain, how much wetness your field sees changes the type of mud, the type of dirt you use, and the type of grass you use. And so if you are in a super dry place, you are trying to use something that might retain moisture so that it won't be like super hard gravel that the ball's hitting, and if you are in a wet place, you'd want to use something that's going to be drier and let that water go. But then you'll have days where you're in a wet place, but it's dry. Right? So I could imagine that maybe if you're in San Francisco and it just happens to be a dry week, they have these weird early season, late season where the weather's great. If you want to go to San Francisco, go in like October or February. Like that's like the best time. It's the weirdest thing. And I bet you that sometimes that gravel gets a little bit dry because it's meant to be dry. It's designed to be dry, Might be I think I've heard the cases in San Diego that sometimes it plays drier than other times. So that is, and it is also from a modeling standpoint, from a numbers standpoint. I remember Andrew Perpetua used to hate singles, and he said that singles are the worst thing because you can't model them because they hit the ground a lot of times, and once the ball hits the ground, you have no idea what it's going to do. He said it's just that's the biggest source of chaos, and that's why maybe if you think about it, we've barrels, power, doubles, homers, like those things, they don't hit gravel and go flying in the other direction. And so the game always tends to like organize towards things that are predictable and have less chaos in them. And that might be why there's a little bit of the death of the single across baseball, is that it's hard to model, and it's, you can't be reliably a singles hitter unless you're like Luis Arias or Stephen Kwan.
Well, and I think for a home park, if you have a climate controlled situation with a roof, maybe then you can model that more effectively. But the outdoor, like the sun and the factor of just how that would impact would be a big deal.
Oh, that just jogged something loose. That's a great comment, because the Rays don't care about lifting the ball as much. They care about hitting the ball hard and making contact and having a good plate discipline. We've seen this. They're not a barrel king. They're a hard hit king. And that is funny because they play in a dome.
Right. And I would imagine that the Trop, if I had to guess, the Trop is probably the fastest infield in the big leagues. Guys that play on those infields could probably give you at least the top ones that are fast and the slowest ones that are slow. The middle of the pack might be a little harder to discern, but
could be a fun story this year.
Yeah. So, all right, we step on new rakes. That's our mantra on this show. Anytime you can step on a new rake, step on that. Got some mailbag questions to get to here before the internet melts down. Probably going to melt down more at my house than the press box, which is saying something about my internet service provider. But first question today comes from D. Rivas. It is about Pete Crow-Armstrong's spring heater that he's on right now. Do you think there's anything to that as far as a breakout coming? And I guess I'll broaden this question. Like, when would you be interested in something you see in spring? We've talked about bat speed increasing and how sticky that is, but what else actually matters to you? Are there any process stats you're looking at as we move further into spring training play?
Yeah, right now, the only thing that I care about in PCA's line is steady with last year and has not shown real breakout potential, which is swing strike rate and strikeout rate. That's about the only thing that I'll look at. The strikeout rate for him this spring is 26.9. Last year was 23.9. He's been up and down in the minors. He has a 14.9% swing strike rate. PCA does right now. It was 15.8% last year. So I would say that he's steady when it comes to contact. When it comes to balls in play, I mean, it's 26 plate appearances. If we were 9 games into the regular season, we wouldn't be reporting on this. When you start getting to maybe 15, 20 games, maybe double the sample, I think you can look a little bit of ground ball, fly ball mix. He is hitting fewer ground balls this spring. But I think on a 9-game sample, what happens is, and one of the reasons why ground ball rate can be sticky early, but you have to have some sample, is because that they could just be pitching him a certain way where he can hit the fly balls, and then they'll change pitching him that way. Like, there'll be an adjustment at some point. And ground balls come from lower in the zone, generally, and fly balls come from higher in the zone generally. So the way the pitchers are pitching him has something to do with his results right now. And then very obviously, depending on like the quality of the pitchers he's seen.
Right. And the quality is a fun thing to bring up because if you look at the spring training homer leaderboard, I believe you'll see Trace Thompson's name at the top. He's popped 6 homers. Is Trace Thompson seeing the best pitchers in the game, or is he seeing the back half of the game pitchers so far, right? There's probably more of the latter than the former, kind of explaining how he's been doing that. But it is interesting when you see...
And he has an 81% fly ball rate. Like, that's... no one has ever had an 81% fly ball rate.
I would love to see it, just to say that I saw it, though. Yeah. Give me an 81% fly ball rate. Spencer Torkelson's got 3 homers this spring. A CES is showing he's healthy. Like a Rule 5 pick like Gage Workman getting to some power. Like those things are all interesting. Curtis Mead having a big spring. Alan Roden hasn't struck out yet. Like there's little things in here, but
plate appearances.
Right, usage.
Plate appearances. You can see that they're still playing. Spencer Torkelson has 24 plate appearances, and Mead with Junior Caminero has some sort of nagging injury, right?
He's got that back.
Yeah, so Mead has 24 plate appearances. I think that's something that I would track. So plate appearances and strikeout rate is about it.
Yeah, that's a good call. Look at that plate appearance leaderboard. Eggy Rosario getting a lot of plate appearances for the Padres. I liked him for draft and hold purposes. Don't know if he's breaking through on that roster right away on opening day.
Oh, you know what that means? How many more plate appearances does he have than Tirso Ornelas?
One. They're both getting similar heavy usage.
That's probably. I didn't realize this. That is probably a roster battle that we didn't cover because it's not obvious because they don't play the same position. But some of these at bats are coming from DH, so you could pick Eggy Rosario over Tirso Ornelas for this team.
I think Tirso would be set up to play more, though, because they have the need in a corner outfield spot. And he's shown really good plate skills for several minor league stops. I know he got to more power than ever during his time last year in the upper levels of the minors. And it wasn't like it was all El Paso either. It was like 4 homers in 55 games there, 11 and 72 at Double-A before that promotion. So I think Tirso Ornelas is a good deep league sleeper who's actually putting together a spring that gets you excited.
Eggy has no options left.
Sometimes you lose to the guy with no options left, or sometimes they DFA that guy. That happens too.
Yeah, so he's fighting for his life right now. That must be so stressful. Oh, God. It must be so stressful. And he's doing okay? I don't know. Yeah, that's a tough one because they also have Jose Iglesias in camp.
Yeah.
I missed that. So, and it's a minor league deal for Jose Iglesias. So it's a little bit of Jose Iglesias versus Eggy Rosario versus Tyler Wade for maybe 2 spots there. And Wade and Eggy Rosario don't have options, and Iglesias doesn't have options either. You lose him if you don't put him on the roster. So I think that's too many guys to keep all of them. I think you keep 2 of those guys, and Ornelas makes the team.
Yeah, maybe they try to sneak Eggy through waivers at the end of spring training. But thanks a lot for that question, D. Rivas. Got a question here from PNW Rays fan. I think that's Pacific Northwest Rays fan. Don't want to make any assumptions, though. This question came to mind for listening to last Friday's pod. All caveats aside on the importance of adjusting for team needs in leagues. If you were to liken your roster building strategy to that of a major league team's approach to roster building, which team would it be and why? This is pretty fun. So the initial thoughts here, Eno leans towards a Rays build, accruing value while balancing needs. And DVR skews Dodgers or Pods, high risk, high reward.
Dodgers. Yeah. Dodgers. You're Dodgers. I was going to say that.
I load up a lot of Dodgers pitchers too, so I'm accepting the injury risk. Could see arguments for Eno being the recent Kansas City regime, identifying and acquiring potential risers and underrated role players before they're outside a comfortable range. DVR being like the Chris Young Rangers, sometimes getting a payout on investments like in 2023, other years, down years being more like 2024. Anyway, I know it's a total oversimplification of the roster building process in fantasy and Major League Baseball. Curious to know what you think. Keep up the good work. I thought this was a fun question. So do you want to self-diagnose or do you want to diagnose me with a team that I follow the pattern of?
I think I'll try self-diagnosing. The thing that makes it hard to comp to the major leagues is the major leagues teams have different levels of resource, and we theoretically going into any draft have the same amount of resources as everybody else, right? So one thing that I do think that the Brewers do that I like to think that I do is they'll trade pitching for hitting. They've done it multiple times, and it seems like they're trying to, given the resources they have, put together the lineup first, and then sort of put together the rotation. And that's always been my sort of approach is I'm focused on the lineup. I think I said this on the pod the other day, which is that I'm trying to take hitters. I don't even use the projections for pitchers like in an auction calculator way because I'm trying to take hitters all the time. And anytime I'm like, I don't really like the hitters, then I take a pitcher.
Right. And you can pretty easily look at the snapshot of who's likely to go, choose the one you like the most that won't be there next time, and move on.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of that with the Brewers where I feel like they're always trying to improve their lineup because it's hard. Lineups take money, and they don't necessarily have that kind of money, So I'm always trying to, and then they also put a priority on defensive positions, which isn't something that's obvious in fantasy, but I do put a priority on infield positions because I feel like I can fill out the outfield. So they wanted Joey Ortiz in that trade. Who did they trade Drew Rasmussen for? That was for
Rasmussen was the Adames trade, I think.
Yes. See, they traded Drew Rasmussen for Adames. They traded Corbin Burns for Joey Ortiz. I think that like that's I'm always trying to do stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a good call. I think that's something they've done effectively as an organization. I see you do that effectively as a fantasy player as well. I do think the Padres and Dodgers and Rangers all do kind of describe what I do though. Like I'll take high end shots in the pool, aiming for past peaks, knowing that you might miss the past peak because of injury risk. Like I would have been a GM that would have said, yeah, let's throw that money at Corey Seager. I don't care that he might miss 30 or 40 games in any given year with the various things that he's dealt with. When he's out there, he's a difference maker. He's the kind of player that's impossible to sign and very difficult to draft and develop. So I do like to take shots like that. I think the longer term view too, the Padres, they're very pot committed right now because of the way the team's built. And it was something the late Peter Seidler wanted, was to try and bring a championship to San Diego. I think the more I played, the more I realized the future is overrated. Right? Prospects are great. Prospects are fun, but the future is overrated. Like every time I have to play for the future in a keeper league, I feel like I have just wasted a year of my life. Like it's a missed opportunity. Right?
And I'm immediately, I could be the A's too. And I don't want it to come with all the baggage of the A's or whatever. I'm not talking about a lot of the business decisions or anything, but when I do rebuild, I don't have the patience for a long rebuild. So whenever my auto team is not doing great, instead of like being like, oh, I'll recover in the draft next year, I'm like, the work starts now. And the work starts with trading away guys for guys who are in the big leagues. I don't want your prospects. I want your big leaguers. I want a young big leaguer back. I will trade you 5 overpriced veterans, give you all the rental money you need if you give me one measly young bat at a good price. You know what I mean? And so, there is a lot of like, I would rather have a guy who is also going to play this year for me in the big leagues so that I can decide if he's part of the rebuild or not, quickly. I'd rather have guys that are going to show me quickly rather than I'm not that big a fan of the 17-year-old. We were in this league together where people are drafting guys who might, be drafted in the first round of the draft next year. And it's like, I don't have the patience for that. I don't know. What am I can get a 19. I just picked up Jared Cerna in that draft. Jared Cerna is my kind of guy. Okay, he's too small. We're not sure what his power is like, but he makes contact. And guess who he plays for? The Marlins, and he plays in the middle infield. And he's played at AA and AAA. I don't have to wait that long. And he's still youngish. He's 21 or 22. Like, why do I need to go get a 17-year-old that has to make it through 2 or 3 hoops before he's actually, of great value? So I'm a Gerrit Cerna guy. So Gerrit Cerna is like very much an A's type approach. And the Marlins are kind of pulling an AZ type approach too, of just getting a lot of guys who are close to the big leagues and hoping one of them works out.
Yeah, I would say the pitching risk and budget thing is like, I am kind of like the Rays in how I think about pitching. Like, think about all the guys they've got that have had multiple TJs in that mix for the rotation. I'll take that chance because when they're out there, kind of like that Corey Seager philosophy, they're well above average pitchers. They have extremely high ceilings. I'll try and find depth, and I'll use that sort of low to me. No one likes these guys. I'll take my chance on them inexpensively and just see if I find something that other people or models aren't necessarily as in love with yet, right? I think that's a little bit of like a Rays sort of approach that I try to merge with my big spender mindset. Because, yeah, we don't have the... I don't walk into the auction with $400 instead of $260, so I can't go like full Dodgers as suggested in the question. But a fun question. Thanks for sending that one in, PNW Rays fan. Last question for today. What are the in-season viewing habits you guys have watching games? Are you watching specific teams? Are you watching specific pitchers? MLB Big Inning? How do you build your viewing schedule over the course of the year? This question comes from Anya.
It's all about pitching.
I
just look at the pitching probables, and because I think you'll get the hitters over time if you're following the pitchers. And I'm expected to analyze the pitchers, so that's where I'm expected to be. And then I think that watching a pitcher, you might catch something, like a new pitch or a new philosophy, a new mix, something like that you can catch faster. Not even necessarily faster than the numbers, because the numbers are capturing all of this, but like you can see it and react to it faster and be on top of it more, rather than like, do I have to run a query every day that's like, who changed their pitching mix? No, instead I can watch 2 or 3 innings, and you can watch 2 or 3 innings. You don't have to watch the whole game. And I do struggle with the hardest time for me to decide when to watch is sort of like August, when we're not really bringing up the young guys to start. There's a lot of like just veterans, and I'm trying to like maybe watch to know about what they'll be in the postseason, you know. And so then I'm just trying to watch a team that maybe is hot or cold, and just be like, why are they struggling, or why are they so hot, and is it just luck, or is there something else going on? So, but mostly it's just pitching probables. One thing that I found is that Nick Pollock has a morning tweet or Bluesky that's like, here are the pitchers to watch for, and he just like lists the ones that'll have video. I find that helpful. I just go there and I'm like, oh yeah, I want to see him. I watch him for 2 innings, watch that guy for 2 innings. Watched a bunch of Jacob Mizorowski because he's always highlighting him. He's always on TV.
Yeah, I think it's. I think a lot of people that cover baseball think about it pitching first for that reason, because the hitters are there every day. Other factors for me, I do sort of prioritize the Brewers most days because I still get to have a rooting interest. It's the best part of not being in the clubhouse is that I can just still kind of keep that little bit. If I start going to the clubhouse, I have to get rid of that. But I think I actually care about the announcers too, as far as like picking which games I'm going to watch. At least I'll choose the feed that I like better. So that's always a consideration for me. If there's similar matinees on where there's not necessarily a pitcher I want to watch, I'll just choose the most enjoyable booth, because sometimes I have to do other things while I'm watching, so I don't get to have the full like locked in sort of experience. I do think Big Inning is better than I thought it would be, just because there's so much dead time in games. Having 4 on the screen at once is pretty helpful, and not having to flip around. And they know which games are kind of important. Like they're cycling.
And they choose the audio for that.
Yeah, they'll cut to the audio on the most important game. They'll throw it back to the studio, and then go back to their game and kind of bounce around. Like I think it's generally pretty helpful for what we do, because you can get eyes on more hitters and pitchers that way. And especially at the busy times, like Tuesday nights when all the teams are in action, Friday nights all the teams are playing. You don't have that ability to pick and choose as effectively, so you need to kind of cover more. So I've actually found Big Inning the last year to be pretty nice. And then of course, what do they call the recap show? The one that's on before DeRosa. Quick pitch. Yeah, I watch a lot of Quick Pitch in the morning too, just to get back through and just see the stuff that may have slipped through the cracks the night before. I find that to be a really good recap show.
You bring up an interesting idea of the sort of the default viewing, the default team. I can't call it like a rooting interest for myself, but my family has a default team. So
you do a lot of Padres games at your house.
The Padres are on, yeah. So we do a lot of Padres, and we'll switch around, through the East Coast games, and then if a game is just on while we're eating or in the background or something, it'll always be Padres. So I can't say that my family are intense baseball fans. My oldest Felix does hop around with me. So he likes hopping around, and he knows the stars, and he knows like different. He's not like I know everybody on the Padres roster. He's more like I know the biggest players, So, and he also loves the Baseball America prospect book, that we get. And so he'll read that, and so he's always like looking out for prospects. So his viewing is a little bit different. When we switch to a team, I'm doing it for the pitcher, and he's asking me who are the prospects, who are the young guys that are coming up. So I've got one person on board to like just be totally schizophrenic with our watching. We're just like bap 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 bap, like this just switch. This game's boring. Like on to the other one, But the Padres are kind of the default, and then when there's no other reason to watch something else.
Kind of feels like
they're also
on
last.
That's definitely going to play. Well, yeah, like the last thing. So where you live also, I think, shapes your viewing patterns a lot. So it was very easy on the West Coast to get through all the early games and stay up to the end of the late games. Very easy to do. I think once you get to like Central, where I've lived most of my life, it's much harder to watch the end of West Coast games as your various life responsibilities and stages come along. You're like, oh man,
babies and children and
the fifth or sixth inning. If I get to the sixth inning of a West Coast game on a weeknight, I'm doing very well right now. So I do miss that part of living in California, where I would watch a lot of Giants games out there. And I felt, because that was, I think I was there for the magical year and the year after. So that was pretty good twist of like, oh,
both reasons to watch.
Yeah,
they can't be this good. They can't be this bad.
Yeah, so I caught way more Giants games when I lived out there. I think it's mostly Dodgers and Padres. Part of it's the booth, though, too. Again, like the Padres booth or Silo and Grant, like you just sort of gravitate towards them if you're not seeking out a pitcher on that particular part of the slate. But a great question, Anye, and it's screens anywhere and everywhere we can find them, and constantly battling for the remote to just keep cranking more baseball into the lives of the other people in our homes. And I think they
My
like.
My wife
the break
is just like,
season.
no. The youngest is on his iPad. The Felix will play along for a little bit before he goes upstairs to do his gaming.
They're putting me on the iPad now and taking the TV away. So I think that's
oh no.
It's okay. It's fine. It's
put
actually
baby in
nice.
the corner.
Yeah, they're like, do some dishes and watch the game over there. Fine. Put my headphones on. We'll multitask. That's fine if that's what has to be done. We appreciate the questions. Drop us some questions in our Discord. The Discord link is in the show description. We do have our Listener Champions League getting underway Tuesday night. We're going to do a slow draft for that one. So invites are out. I think all the seats have been filled. If you were part of that group and didn't respond, you can still respond late, and we'll figure out a way to get you into a league with us in 2026. We'll find some kind of make good. But I think everybody, for the most part, was able to join, which is exciting. You can find Eno on Bluesky, Sarris.bsky.social. I'm DVR.bsky.social. Thanks to me. I think I'm the producer today. Brian Smith has a couple other shows he's working on for The Athletic today. So I guess I'll thank myself for putting this episode together. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Tuesday.
Thanks for listening.